Hello YouTube, this is going to be a video about my Rock Island Armory M1911-CS, also known as the Officer's Model of 1911. This is typically going to have a 3.5-inch barrel. There are other models that differ in their design. Some have a 3-inch barrel. Some also may differ in the overall grip length, but typically it is going to maintain this kind of grip and that kind of barrel and slide assembly, 3.5 being the Rock Island Armory model. Weight, same thing as you'll see on the backboard there, is again going to apply to this and not every single other model under the sun. So my arguments for and against this are strictly going to apply to the Rock Island Armory model of Officers 1911, nothing else. Alrighty, without out of the way, one of the things that a lot of people like to do is compare this and, with the most current, standard capacity Glock 19 clone or SIG or something that would be not only in a separate caliber, but is going to be a completely different size altogether. That's not the argument. So what I want to do is almost talk you out of buying one of these for concealed carry, just because there's going to be some pros, there's going to be some cons, and if you are starting from scratch, you are starting from, basically a beginner's stage in either, personal protection or firearm collecting, this may not be the route to go. Up on the board, we have a couple. There we go, turn my hand around. We have the Ruger American 7+1 capacity at 29 ounces. We have the Glock 36 at 6+1 capacity and 20 ounces. We have an XDS 45 at 7+1 capacity and 23 ounces. The M&P Shield at 6+1 capacity and 22 ounces. Now, obviously, the capacities can change drastically with these. There are going to be magazines that increase or decrease the capacity. However, these are typically the standard factory capacities. We will notice the same thing down below with our 1911s. The standard would typically be a 6+1. However, the Rock Island Armory ships with a ACT magazine, which achieves a 7+1 capacity within this grip, despite this typically housing the 6+1, which is why I wrote both. Now, its weight comes in at a whopping 3.7 or 37.76, getting tongue-tied there, ounces. Now, the reason that's important is if we jump down, this is the Rock Island Armory full size, and again, taking note that the typical, capacities are going to be a 7+1 or a 8+1 respectively. Obviously, there is room for error when it comes to the 10-round higher capacity magazines. However, we are just focused on those two variants. Its weight is going to be 39.52. The reason this is important is it is a good comparison in weight savings that you may or may not consider when buying one of these, which puts this in a particular, I would say interesting category. You may as well carry a full-size 1911 if all we are is concerned about size, or not size, but weight. The reason why something like this would be possibly a little bit more appealing is because of the size savings. Again, you reduce this by about a round's width. Same thing with the barrel. We go from a 5-inch to a 3.5-inch. Again, specifically talking about the Rock Island Armory model of Officers 1911, not the ATI or some of the other ones that have a solid 3-inch variant. So with all of those models and weights and capacities used as a comparison, one would ask themselves why in the world you would carry a 1911, let alone an Officer's model 1911, especially in the, lower capacity range. Well, you could also, I guess, compare this to the Glock 30, which would then yield a 10+1, or even the Rock Island Armory BBR, I believe is what it's called, the Baby Rock or something of that nature, which again is a very pugly double stack 45 ACP variant, yielding roughly 10 rounds. Now, again, on paper, in my opinion, this isn't a logical choice. And I will touch on some of the key, I would say, issues in the pros and cons segment here at the end of the video. When you obviously see the weights and capacities listed here, you can carry a bit more if you opted for one of these. One of my preferred ones, even though it's a little bit stout in the hand because of its lightness, would be the XDS 45. Now there's, I guess, like a version 1 or version 2 or some shit like that. I don't currently own one. However, I've shot one and I see those come up for deal all the time. Typically they will come with a fuck ton of magazines. You can get a whole bunch of accessories. There's still a bunch of holsters out there. that would be for, you know, your consideration if you were to buy something used and you wanted the best bang for your buck. Now, there's nothing wrong with the other ones. I haven't personally shot with the other ones, so I couldn't tell you. However, they are going to be much lighter and they're going to yield the same exact capacity, give or take a round or so. So with all of that said, in comparison, let's focus on the pistol here. Now, I initially found this for an insanely good deal. Let's say, because again, I have no idea how to keep track of YouTube's ever-changing fucking retroactive, enforced policies. Let's just say 250... I don't even know what units, quatlus, so there we go, as a price. Well, typically it would go for maybe 400 or 350 quatlus. So in my opinion, it was a fairly good deal and it was local, which is why I picked it up. I thought it was going to have a drastic weight difference. I did not do my due diligence and actually compare the overall weight stat between this and the full-sized. Again, I will dive into that more in the pros and cons section when comparing it to the full-sized. So let's just talk a little bit about the pistol itself here. So these will typically come, if you get the GI model, it's going to have very rudimentary sights front and rear here. The rear sight can be drifted for windage, but short of that, that's about it, and you are stuck with a fixed front sight. Panels on the GI model are typically going to be a wood panel. These are just some ergo, kind of like rhino grip panels that I got for the officer's model here. The pistol itself is going to typically ship with one, perhaps two, of the ACT 7-round magazines. Now, obviously, it's not going to focus. I am just doing this from a phone, so take a fucking grain of salt with everything you see here. But this will yield 7 rounds, and as I mentioned on the chart up above, typically what you are going to see is a 6-round magazine associated with the officer's model of 1911. Now, the way these would typically fit in flush, if we were to expect that, is going to look something like this. Okay, where it differs with the ACT mag, this thicker base plate down here is going to insert up and into the pistol, and you'll see just a slight overhang. Nothing really for an extended pinky grip or anything like that, although I suppose you could utilize it for that. But this gives us enough of that internal geometry to stack an extra round in there. MechGar also makes a 7-round officer's mag with a similar type of base plate, but typically the flush ones you will see here are strictly going to be 6 rounds. This is also a 6-round magazine. This is a metal 4 magazine, and one of the things I have become a fan of is any of the magazines that have the small drilled and tapped holes here allow for the use of a bumper pad. So something that will help you almost actuate the loading of the magazine a little bit better. So sometimes with a flush fit magazine, let's say you're on the range, or I know I realize I mentioned in an earlier video, I don't typically like talking about only defensive use stuff. However, this being a, concealed carry pistol, which by the way, it is empty. Being a concealed carry pistol, I thought if I use any of these terms or whatnot, it is strictly because this is an actual concealed carry pistol of mine. Now, that being said, if you're at the range, or let's say you were to use this under duress and you were to load this, the flush fit magazine, sometimes as you insert this and you go to load it, if you don't really have that tension, let's say you got big old fat hands, sometimes I go to do this and I roll the gun over and I think I have loaded it. I'm actually not fully seated. So you have to really make sure you hit the butt of the gun and then either power stroke or release the slide or what have you. So this can sometimes be an issue and something to be, I would say, conscious of. Why I like the bumper pads is because this gives you a little bit more area of I would say, I'm spacing on the fucking word. Articulation. There we go. I am sick, so again, take this all with a grain of salt. But what this allows me to do is insert the magazine. I have a little bit more positive of a seat here as I go to load the magazine. I actually have something to ram this up and in and actually have it seat, whereas this could potentially be an issue. So that would be something to consider if you were to conceal carry this, that a enlarged base pad here or a bumper pad here may make that a little bit easier for you. Now, the next thing that most people may talk about would be the reliability issue with 1911s in general. And they're not wrong. This is an antiquated design. This is an older design that has its own its own era of limitation for when it was designed. Now, a couple of those problems are going to be as such. You're going to have what gets called out on forums quite often is the magazines. Almost everybody's going to point to the magazines right away. And this can be an issue. If you're buying the most bottom barrel, just no-name brand magazines, yes, that could be an issue. However, the 1911 game has really stepped up. You have MechGar, you have Metal Form, you have ACT, which some people will say is bullshit. These have been flawless for me. So I really don't understand the hate there. Sometimes you can even have more expensive magazines, like from Wilson Combat, as well as a few others. So I don't see a whole ton of these. That's not to say that the cheaper no-name brands aren't out there, but that could be remedy number one, is go ahead and get yourself a magazine of a reputable brand. Luckily with 1911s, they can range from a very expensive rate down to a pretty affordable rate. These Metal Form magazines run about $10 or 10 quatlus. The MechGars hover anywhere between 10 and 20 quatlus. The ACT here ran, I think, for 16 quatlus or so, up to 20. So you have a few different options. The next issue, and this one is a little bit sight unseen, but it can be a funky one that you may run into from time to time. The slide lock lever here, or takedown lever. Now, sometimes this nub here, I will insert a magazine. Again, it is all unloaded. Don't be a fucking retard. Sometimes that little nub can rub up against the round or the head of the round itself. And this actually happened to me. And you can tell on my slide, this deformation right here, this was a premature slide stop. And it was happening one day at the range because of particular fat 45 ACP rounds that I was using. And I noticed a little bit of copper buildup on that nub right there. So what I decided to do is take out jeweler files to the range, load it up with the same type of thicker ammunition that I have. I don't know if it was, I mean, the grain should, the weight of the bullet should have still been the same, but I had these particular brands and I forgot what it was. It was back when I first got this a few years ago, and I wasn't taking as aggressive a notes as I am on my stuff currently. But either way, I ran into a lot of issues with that. So I ended up filing it down, and then voila, no premature slide stop. The next issue, this is probably the more common, especially with the officer's model of 1911s. It's going to be your extractor here. Now this is basically one piece of metal that goes in there that has this perfect bent shape to it. So it's going to be a little stout getting it in or out, because all it uses is that bent tension inside of the slide to be able to have that perfect geometry to get in and by the case and then pull it out. Sometimes that can get fucked up, so you may have to go online. If you're getting a lot of very bizarre ejection going on, or you're getting a fail to eject or extract, that is going to be the first thing that I would implore you to look at. Sometimes it can be spring issues and things like that. Sometimes it can be your magazine and its feeding. But I would say one of the things to consider would possibly be the extractor. That's almost always going to be the Achilles heel. Typically 9mm 1911s can, especially the single stacks, that can be a huge issue. My Rock Island Armory GI model, chambered in 9mm, that is one of the things I'm currently going through, so I'm going to have to replace that. Wilson Combat does have enhanced extractors that you can go ahead and drop in there, which that's a loose term when it comes to 1911s. There's a lot of hand fitting and trial and error with 1911s, as there is no absolute standard. Some things can differ. Sometimes there can be proprietary measurements. Same thing goes with the aftermarket parts supply. Sometimes it will take some extra hand fitting to be able to get some things to work inside of your pistol. Now, one of the other funky things for those not in the know, with a reverse plug, as seen here, again, it is unloaded. Despite there being live ammo there, that will never touch this while on video, okay? We have what is called a reverse plug. Now, the way to take this down is to actually go in, let me see here, with this very expensive tool. This is what they call a bent paper clip, and you will go in and you will put this into that hole, and then once you take out your slide stop here and you drop the slide and you take this out, what this is going to do with that reverse plug is hold the spring and reverse plug portion on the recoil rod down here which then allows you to take this all out as a unit. That is kind of a little baffling when you first get an officer's model of 1911, but short of that, that's the only funky thing. We also have, you know, some of the other stuff. Now, you cannot, with this as design, you cannot go to a standard 1911 bushing setup. This is just how it is for the officer's model of 1911. That's how it works. Now, there could be some funky ones that I'm unsure of, but again, we are talking specifically about the Rock Island motherfucking Armory officer's model of 1911. So please, for the love of fuck, do not bring up something that is not this. I am stating that you cannot magically convert this to the standard front half of a 1911 with a standard bushing and barrel and all of that bullshit. So, that being said, these will typically come in 45 and 9. Again, there can be some other calibers and other shit, but we're going to basically talk about this. And now, the 9mm. Some would ask, well, I may not like the weight of the 45 ACP ammo. I may not like the recoil impulse. Well, I would say if you were to choose the 9mm officer's model of 1911, that it will lend itself to a bit more accuracy because the overall total weight of this pistol is going to soak up quite a bit of that minimal recoil from the 9mm cartridge. However, that being said, there are a ton of single stack 9mm that offer a little bit more in capacity, much lighter weight, and are still very, very manageable. So I'm not really sold on the 9mm officers version unless there's some funky state law, or unless you get just an insanely good deal on something like this, chambered in 9mm. I went with the 45 since a lot of my other 1911s are in 45. This was just a natural, you know, path of progression where I wanted the smaller version of this. There is a mid-size version, which is the Commander or Tanker version, which is going to have the same grip size as a standard 1911, but will have a shorter barrel and slide assembly. In all honesty, that's not something I would go after. I would either have the standard or I'd have the officers. Having one that's kind of in the middle, to me, I don't really see the point. Your draw time isn't going to be any more improved. The weight savings is so insignificant. That's not an excuse. You know, the sight radius is also going to be diminished going with that Commander or Tanker size. So to me, I think that's kind of pointless. I also think a 9mm officer's model is kind of pointless. But some would also state that the 45 ACP officer's model is kind of pointless, and I 100% agree. It is, but it is a blast to shoot. The overall weight here does lend itself to recoil or perceived recoil mitigation. So as you are firing this, it does soak up some of it. Now this, compared to a full-sized, is a slight bit more snappy. However, it's very manageable. It is every bit as accurate. However, the GI models are the no-frills, very basic type of 1911s, not really meant for all the wacky upgrades and bells and whistles and things like that, which is also going to be a natural downside to most 1911s in general, as there is going to be some hand fitting expected if you really want to add some funky parts and things like that. Now, here are a couple of other things that were noted on the Wilson Combat YouTube channel. And if you really listen to the guys and you don't just write it off as FUD lore, if you listen to a gentleman who actually competes and builds 1911s, in my opinion, he had some sound advice. And because this is an older design of pistol, just hear me out. There was a couple of things that these guys mentioned. I think it was like Ken Hackathorn and Bill Wilson on one of the episodes. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and go on YouTube and check that out, and you'll see what I'm saying. But basically, what these gentlemen talked about is because of the sensitivity of the extractor, their opinion was as such that you should not drop the slide on an empty chamber. And the reason for that is this is just held in by tension. So on paper, again, what makes a lot of sense is the fact that if I'm ramming this in, and again, this is an older design, this does not at all apply to the modern offerings that are designed for very high volume use. This is something that obviously has a Achilles heel of a design flaw, and that would be that this perfectly, tuned metal piece riding in the slide, ramming up against the barrel on an empty chamber may need that extra cushioning, much like the older style of firearms, or more likely specifically like 22 LR firearms, where they advise that you do not dry fire with them. With the 1911, they were kind of half and half when it came to the dry firing portion, but their big thing was releasing the slide on an empty chamber. And again, if you think about this, we'll just do a quick check. Yes, that is a snap cap, so we will fire it. If you think about it, that advice is sound. It does make sense. This is an older design, and yes, you may be able to do it hundreds or even thousands of times and not have an issue. But let's say you were going to conceal carry. Would you leave it to chance? Would you actually be dropping a slide on an empty chamber again and again and again? And this could also be something to consider if you were to conceal carry this. Do you want a gun that is that sensitive? Now, online, a lot of people talk about the issues of reliability when it comes to 1911s. Well, there you go, bud. That's 100% a glaring issue. Would be that, yes, you cannot cowboy action this and fucking sling the slide at home millions of fucking times and expect it to always work. There may be an issue because, again, this tension inside of that slide, that extractor, has to be almost perfect. And if it is out of tune, I don't know if you're going to be able to bend it yourself, because that motherfucker is stout. So odds are you're probably buying a new extractor and then having it sent. I honestly don't know what the heat treatment and bending process would be like, because I haven't found anything on forums or any videos that actually covers that. So again, that would be something to consider, is like, if you do this quite often, that might be why you're having the reliability issues. And again, listening to their video, it did make sense. So now that is one thing I don't do. I am typically not dropping the slide on an empty chamber. I will typically use snap caps if I'm using it as an example, or if I'm just function chesting, but for the most part, that's about it. So go ahead and inject that. But that's it. Now, as for the dry firing, I think they also said not to do that, to slowly let the hammer down. But I mean, I'll be honest, I can replace the firing pin portion just fine. I'm not really upset about that in terms of taking their advice, but I do believe the whole extractor issue, and that motherfucker can run anywhere from like $40 to $80, depending on who you go through. So that is a piece of advice that I think I would implement. Now, one big issue, like I mentioned briefly when we were talking about the weight on the board, is how to carry this. And that's something that, again, a lot of guys, are in the comment sections especially, oh, I carry fucking a 10-pound gun on my hip every fucking day. Sure you do, buddy. I'm absolutely sure that you fucking carry a solid steel brick on you all times. I can count, again, on two hands the amount of guys that I know that actually do carry 1911s. God bless them. They carry 1911s day in and day out. My father-in-law is one of them. He does own the Colt Commander, but still, it's a fucking 1911 on his hip all the time. So that's pretty fucking impressive, and without exception, he carries it every fucking day, all day, like even into the evening. So that's pretty impressive. Now, that being said, one of the things to help mitigate this would be to use perhaps an off the body method of carry. So something like a bag or a very thick like vest or coat pocket, which is again why this would be a winter carry item for me. Sometimes you can get, if you have just that perfect waist size, like I'm a very big guy, I'm about 6'5", and I'm up there in weight. So it's not the printing I'm worried about, it's the comfort. And again, I'm a big guy, so I can handle the weight, but I also have a lower back injury. So for me, I notice every fucking ounce dangling off my fucking hips. And one of the things I found that really helped was a sling bag or a vest or a coat pocket. Or if those are not options, the suspender method. You have a nice stout belt that is a gun belt, and you use suspenders that have little loops that go around the belt, and it drastically distributes the weight to where you can have something on this far side and then something on your right side, in addition to your phone and your keys and your wallet. And it will greatly help that lower back tension that carrying something like this would cause. Now, does that seem like a little bit of a pussy boo-boo kind of complaint? Well, yeah, it sure does. But I tell you what, how about you carry, let's say, 40 to 50 pounds on your back, and then fall off a roof and land on your ass, just like almost like you just sat down on it, and then have that obliterate your L5. Your L5, the little disc down there in your lower back, have it obliterate it to where that fuses to your pelvis. And then after that happens, then recover naturally without surgery, let it fuse to your pelvis. Don't have an L5 disc anymore, right? That's gone. have the L5 fused to your pelvis, and then recover naturally, have drop foot for 2 years. And then after that, once you can actually walk again, then go ahead and have something like this. Go ahead and have something like this on your fucking hip and tell me you don't fucking notice it. Like, get the fuck out of here, buddy. It is heavy. It will pull on your hip. And if you suffer a back injury, you know what it feels like. So that is a wonderful suggestion. I'm telling you guys, if you have a lower back injury, or if you have a job that creates a lot of lower back tension with spasms, I'm telling you, fucking implement suspenders, man. I know it seems a little fucking dorky, but it will 100% take off the tension. That, or if you go with a sling bag or a coat pocket carry, wonderful way to carry a heavy ass gun and distribute the weight a lot better. All right, we'll power fuck through the pros and cons of the 1911, and again, why, even though we have a lot of pros on there, why I do think it is not probably the best choice for most people. Now, again, bear with me. I have a fucking cold, and it's driving me fucking insane. Holy shit. So, pros. Familiarity. This is going to be the first one. The reason being, the 1911 is America's pistol. There are a ton of motherfuckers out there in the United States that have a brother, mother, sister, cousin, grandfather, fucking uncle, aunt, fucking father themselves. You name it. Somebody you know has a 1911. Now, with that said, if you grew up shooting them, it's going to be pretty fucking familiar to you. And it may be more comfortable for a person to use this because this is what they learn to shoot with. Next, kind of in the same category, would be the nostalgia. Now, this, again, in my opinion, it feels fucking great. I do think that everybody should own a 1911, but I don't think everybody should carry a 1911. And despite this having a cool factor, the 1911 can have troubleshooting issues that are a little bit more difficult for the brand new gun owner or shooter to be able to solve, where they have to jump online, try and figure it out. Sometimes it's not plug and play, so it's not super friendly to a new shooter. And this is where sometimes you'll get people that like start bitching, well, if you don't know how to run it, you shouldn't fucking own one. We all start somewhere. We all start somewhere. Maybe somebody inherited their uncles, their fathers, their grandfathers, their brothers' 1911, and it is their first fucking gun. Well, then yes, at that point, you need to learn how to use it. But if you were just going out and you just bought the one thing that you saw at maybe its price point, or maybe because you see it in movies or whatever, you got to start somewhere, okay? But sometimes those brand new issues on a pistol like this can kind of be baffling to somebody who's brand new. And I get that. I get that. There's a lot of stuff where everything is fitting together, everything is working, but now it's suddenly not operating the way it should. So what the fuck's going on? So it does take a little bit of a level of familiarity, but outside of that, that can be learned over time. The biggest one, typically trigger. Most, even your entry level 1911s are going to have a pretty damn good trigger. Some complaints online about some very gritty ones and things like that, but I've yet to come across a 1911, even a base fucking bottom barrel brand, where the trigger was absolutely fucking terrible. It was, nothing like a SIG P250 or any of the other pieces of shit that have really, really heavy trigger pulls, like a Smith & Wesson SD9 VE, the old ones, or a Sigma. Those were absolutely terrible, but most basic 1911s, pretty decent trigger. Next, one pro and con is going to be the weight. Now, what I briefly mentioned before is that the weight, both in the full-sized and the officer's model, does help absorb recoil. Now, at least perceived recoil. You have a big, fat fucking round getting fired out of this pistol, and that weight has to be distributed somehow, in terms of physics. So as you shoot this, the steel frame is going to help kind of soak some of that up, which does help for accuracy. Next, slim and maneuverable. Despite this having a grip safety, it is slim. This will tuck in tight against the waistband if you do carry it there. Even though it is a very heavy item, it is pretty darn slim and highly maneuverable. Next, we have accuracy. So even though we have a con down below, we have accuracy. These pistols, when you teach a new shooter how to shoot and you teach them the controls, these will almost always get some pretty decent groupings even from brand new shooters. They are just a naturally accurate pistol in most people's hand. You could chalk that up to the slower moving round. You could chalk that up to the weight or the slimness, so that the actual grip around there is much more comfortable for a lot of people. There's a whole host of things you can contribute to the accuracy, but now naturally, it is fairly accurate. And again, this does apply even to some base models. I'm not saying that the lower or mid tier are just as good as the top tier brands, but I am saying from a budget focused perspective that these are still pretty goddamn decent inside of 50 yards, which is exactly what you would want with something if you were to conceal carry or if you were to take it out to the range and have some fun. Next, we have the current cheap options that are out there. Currently, there are multiple brands from companies coming out of Turkey. There's also Taurus, there's Rock Island Armory, there may be a few others where you can get one of these for an insanely good price. And again, it may be a no-frills basic model, but you can get one for, 250 quatloos, maybe 300 or 400 quatloos, which is again a really good price compared to other offerings. But, as you go up in price, one, you're going to want to expect a better finish. You're going to want to, expect more reliability. You might also compare that to another pistol that may have more capacity and might be that better carry option for you. So I don't know if I would go gung-ho and spend a shit ton of money on a all-steel, limited capacity 1911 officer's model for concealed carry. But there's a lot of cheap options out there if you chose to go that route. If we are talking about a full-size 1911, there are a lot of common cheap parts as well as magazines. I would say maybe don't scrimp on the magazines. You don't have to buy $50 ones. There are very good middle tier brands. Look at the reviews. They will do you justice. You're going to be able to find people who have very good reliability with theirs. It's a single stack. It's very hard to fuck up as long as you buy a good brand name. Mekar is fantastic. Metal Form is very good. Some people have complained about Metal Form, but I have yet in all the mags that I have to have any issues. Same thing with ACT. Some people have bitched about these. These have been fantastic. So I don't know what they're talking about, but again, just like with Amazon or anywhere else, sift through the reviews and you will find if it's a good magazine or not. It will work in your pistol. It is a single stack. It is hard to fuck up. Next, we have the holsters as well as some of the parts. As I mentioned before, there is nothing that is drop-in. This is going to be on the cons list. Sometimes you have to hand fit stuff, so it's not plug and play like a Glock 19 clone. Sometimes with 1911s, you may have to expect to either pay a gunsmith or do it yourself. So I hope you're handy with stuff if you want to start changing stuff within the internals, hammer, the trigger, some of the other things, the barrel linkage and stuff like that. You may have to do that yourself or pay somebody to do it. That may be something that, again, if you're a new shooter, you might not be prepared to do, so keep that in mind. Safeties. Some people really enjoy these. They feel very safe with the very soft, very crisp trigger. They feel like if they have a grip safety and they have a manual safety, that they are doubly safe because this needs to be fully depressed and this needs to be swept down for the gun to be ready to shoot. Now you will notice I added a little furry muff back here. This is just to give me a little bit of extra meat or at least push down ability on this grip safety because I have not replaced the spring inside of here. It is just a little too soft for my liking. I would like something a bit more stout. That can be remedied by either doing a new spring or bending the current spring I have. However, I would like to just purchase a spring and put it in there myself that is a little bit more stiff. Now, some people do like that safety feature. Some people don't because, again, as you can see here, sometimes you will get a false depression on the grip safety and not actually actuate it depending on your hand type, and you will go to fire, or depending on your grip type of the gun and you will go to fire and it is a dead trigger because we are not fully depressing this. So that can be a con as well. Lastly, second to last, third to last, actually, shit, I'm getting ahead of myself. These are typically band safe. Now, there are a lot of states that pass draconian anti-gun legislation, and typically they're going after all of the evil, scary guns. However, the FUD guns, such as the 1911, are typically, okay, not always, but typically going to be band safe. So this is probably what has kept the market alive, is not just the FUDs, but there are probably a lot of people who live in states where the capacity laws are 10 and under. Therefore, the 1911s typically take off in popularity simply because something like a double stack 9mm or a double stack 10mm now do not have as much draw to them because you do not have the capacity. You are now stacking it up against something like this. So this can potentially be a reason to carry a single stack of some variety, including the officer's model or full-size 1911. Second to last, a big motherfucking round. Okay, now 45 ACP, you've heard the joke, I'd carry a 46, but they don't make it. Some bullshit like that. Anyway, It's easy to clip a target. It is a big fucking round for self-defense. While it is slow, 45 ACP, when applied through glass, through multiple shots, typically has enough meat behind it, maybe not the speed, but the overall mass to be able to accomplish any kind of penetration through glass. Not always, but within reason and within certain distance and within certain thickness of glass, you might be able to do what you need to do with that. Now, again, it is a slow-moving round, but I tell you what, just like here at the end, it won 2 motherfucking world wars. Now, this is a line typically parroted by people who are 1911 or 45 ACP fans. However, you know, the fact remains, these are technically combat proven. You know, the 45 ACP was out there, was fucking taking on people, and this was obviously before body armor. However, it could be a very ineffective round. So I don't at all feel underarmed when I am taking a 45 ACP chambered firearm. This could include the Glock 21. This could include my SAR Arms K245 or something of that nature, Glock 30. The 45 ACP is still a relevant round. Are there better rounds? There most certainly is. You know, if I have the choice and I can only carry one for the rest of my life, you know what? I'm probably going to fucking carry a 10 millimeter, you know, compared to a 45 ACP. The 10 mil is going to definitely do all that and more of a 45 ACP. But again, we are strictly talking about the 1911 here and the 45 ACP. Cons. So this is both a pro and a con. The weight. Some people do not like this. Some people do not like that over dense weight where it is a steel brick that they are carrying. I fully agree with you. I 100% do. In the modern day offerings, again, this is an antiquated design and an older weight. There are some places that make aluminum frames, but again, you're carrying a metal framed pistol and it's going to have some inherent weight compared to the modern polymer offerings. Capacity, again, though band safe, a lot of people consider capacity to be king. And I do not disagree with that. That is not an argument at all that I make in this video. I think that if you have the ability to, fuck yes, carry as much as you motherfucking can. I mean, obviously I wouldn't do a Pro Mag Ghetto Blaster drum, but I would 100% carry as much as you can. However, my state is constantly flirt fucking with the idea of passing capacity bans. Therefore, I have to get used to carrying things with 10 rounds or less. And the 357 as well as the 1911 that I have fall within that because you cannot carry anything more. Now, this is typically where people say, well, you know, if I'm defending myself, I'll just throw that fucking magazine, you know, and I'll keep a limited capacity one with me. I highly doubt that. Your adrenaline's going to be going. You could end up getting shot and not have this magical amount of time. It's just like people who don't carry one in the chamber. Everybody is under this illusion that they're going to have all of this magic fucking time to, you know, rack the fucking slide and then get to work to defend themselves. Sometimes you don't have that kind of time. Same would go if I had a double stack pistol and I'm carrying something. And the problem is there's a lot of people that are like, well, you know, fuck it. I'd rather be judged by a jury than, you know, dead. And I agree. I do agree. I agree that it's an infringement. But here's the problem is if you live in a very liberal, aggressive anti-gun state, they're going to stick it to you. And if you're one of those martyr cases, you're going down, dude. And no one's going to give a fuck how tough you are. No one's going to fucking come to your aid and magically fucking bail you out because you broke the law, and it's either going to give you a felony or a misdemeanor. You're going to spend some fucking time in jail, and it's going to fuck you. If you have a family that you love, if you have a dog that you love, if you have, you know, any kind of pride in your gun rights, unfortunately, sometimes you have to play by the law because you just get fucked in the end, you know. And that's the problem is I don't want to be that first martyr. I don't want to be that example. So obviously, because of my career, because of my family, because of my dog, I don't want the ATF coming in and fucking shooting my goddamn dog. I got to play ball. I have to play ball. I have to be that person that abides by the law. If you want to be that guy that carries all the extra rounds, fuck yes, more power to you. I will even be like, oh, I didn't see anything. I will 100% back you up. However, I can't be that guy. So for me, capacity is something that I have to be, I have to abide by and something that I'm trying to get used to. So I have kind of, I still have my fun firearms, but for carry, if my state ends up passing this bullshit, I gotta fucking play ball and it fucking sucks. But it's just what I have to do because I ain't willing to fucking spend a life savings, fighting this shit in court and losing my fucking freedom and my gun rights over it. So it's just, it is what it is. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's just cowardice. Well, it's really easy to say that when you're behind a fucking computer screen eating Cheetos, you fucking retards out there. If if you cherish your fucking family and your fucking freedom and your gun rights, I mean, obviously I will do everything I can and donate to those pro-gun organizations that help fight this shit in court. But there are not a ton of people who actually put their money where their mouth is, and they just bitch about it online as if they're this fucking, Joe Bob fucking constitutionalist, but you ain't doing a motherfucking thing to help anybody or the effort to protect our 2A rights. So get the fuck out of here. Okay, next, safeties. Some people do not like manual safeties. As I mentioned before, sometimes we get a false positive with that grip safety there, and it isn't fully engaged, and we go to depress the trigger and nothing happens because it's not engaged. This is why that little muff is there. Sometimes that spring can wear out. That is why I added it. It gives me that little bit of extra room. If I had a little TIG welder, I'd probably add just a little bit of material there so I could depress it. Some people do not like a secondary safety. They would accept just the grip, much seen on that XDS that I had on the board not too long ago. However, they don't like a manual safety. I could take it or leave it. I don't mind the safeties, especially with a really light trigger like that. It does not bother me, but it may bother you. No drop-in parts. We've covered this in the pros. The drop-in parts, obviously you're going to have very simple stuff like your grips, sometimes the sights. However, with a GI model like this, you're stuck with a fixed front sight unless you weld something on there. And then with the rear sight, again, why the fuck would you fuck with that? There are other models, but we're only talking about this one right now. Reliability, as I mentioned before. For reliability, because of the extractor, because of the takedown lever here, because of the magazines, and then possibly, the barrel link and things like that, you can get really weird fucking issues going on, and it may not be as reliable as, let's say, a Glock 19 or something of that nature. So that can be an issue. Lastly, second to last, we have the steel. So the reason I carry this in the wintertime is because this is a steel-framed gun. I do not sweat as much in the wintertime, so I learned my lesson early on carrying an all-steel pistol when I first turned 21, and I just wanted to carry what I could carry. I wanted a big old heavy fucking gun, and I shot well with it. That's where my money was at the time. It was something I got at a pawn shop. Fuck yeah, right? Well, all that sweat will find its way into all the nooks and crannies. And if you are not diligent with your maintenance, it will 100% start to cause internal corrosion. And it could be enough, especially if you work outside a lot in the summertime. I'm not talking about those motherfuckers that are going in their motherfucking air-conditioned truck or sitting in a fucking computer all day or being inside. I'm talking about motherfuckers with goddamn calluses and shit on their fucking hands that are out there day in and day out in the summertime where you have actual sweat just dripping off you. You are fucking soaked to the bone. Sometimes it is not a good idea to carry a steel-framed firearm. Why is that? Well, it's because the sweat will get into every little nook and cranny in here if you carry inside the waistband. Off the body, maybe not as big of a deal. However, in the waistband, there will be sweat that gets into all of this. That steamy sweat can easily get in there. I have seen it firsthand. It is my anecdotal evidence, but I have motherfucking seen it. So there is a reason why all steel, just parkerized guns like this or blued guns, I do not carry in the summertime. I carry them in the wintertime. I carry them when I'm not as sweaty, when I can tuck them into a bag, into my pants, into my coat, and not have to worry about that corrosion issue. That is a real issue. It is something to consider. It may not be an issue for you. You may have millions of fucking dollars online, typing on your fucking computer and telling me how much magical fucking money you have. I don't, okay? If I buy something, I'm going to try and keep it up and running. I'm going to try to keep it from, absolutely rusting like a motherfucker inside. And I also do not want to take this apart every single week to be able to maintain it. I have better shit to do with my time than to take this down every fucking week and ensure that I preserved it and then put it back together. Is that overkill? Yes, it is. But if this is a defensive firearm, I am going to want to have this operate as efficiently as possible. Therefore, I am not going to risk having a bunch of gunk in there. I'm not going to risk any fuzzy rust on any of the springs or the internals that it's going to slow down the hammer, slow down the trigger, anything like that. Okay? It makes perfect fucking sense. Please do not disagree with that, because you might not have actually carried off the coast or sweating like a motherfucker where you have got this absolutely soaked to the bone in sweat. I have. It can happen, and it has happened. I've taken it out to the range and then click, nothing happened. Now, it was not a 1911, but at the same time, it definitely can happen. Please don't be that stick in the mud that just wants to argue for the sake of arguing. It has happened to me. I'm going to die on that motherfucking hill. Okay, I have mentioned sights before, but I guess I did put that as last. So the GI model, you are limited to sights. Some motherfuckers like to put those gay-ass night sights on there. I think night sights are a bit of a fucking scam. I don't really give a shit about them. I think that if I am firing at night, the silhouette is going to be within 25 or 50 yards. I am not making hyperactive shots, or hyper-accurate shots, rather, at a tiny-ass glass target where it is not illuminated and it is somehow in the dark. Even if I have, let's say, a rabid animal attacking my dog, I am most likely going to have a light with me. One of the other cons that you could say is that the Rock Island Armory frame here, this particular model, does not have a light rail. However, there are the UltraTac models that do have the whole whiz-bang rail systems. If you are going to be firing at night, again, I don't see the use in night sights. I think it is a fucking stupid idea. I can somewhat, with like the Galil, I can understand night sights on a rifle. I really can. You are shooting at distance. Typically, this is going to be from 100 to 300 yards. 300 would be pushing it at nighttime because it's going to be black nothingness out there. However, inside of 100 yards, shooting with night sights makes perfect sense. I can see that. When the fuck would I be engaging a target with my pistol at distance where I need hyper fucking time? Let's see that little hole right there. Hyper fucking accuracy. I'm not going to be doing that. Okay, if they cannot see me, my goal is to get the fuck out of there. If I cannot see them, why am I shooting? That could be a fucking kid. That could be a fucking officer. Who fucking knows? So I don't like night sights. I think that is stupid. And again, this is a hill I will die on. You may have some point that you make. That is totally fine. Some guys get really invested into their accessories. However, I see no fucking use in night sights. I just don't. Okay, how many of us are really going out all the motherfucking time shooting at night? Almost nobody, but it's a cool feeling to have. Oh, well, because I can shoot it in my home, and, you know, I can, if I have night sights, I can line it up onto a tiny target, if there's a bad guy coming down the hallway. No, you're not. Your adrenaline's going to be pumping through your fucking veins. You're not going to be able to stay on motherfucking target. You're going to be blasting. You're going to, you know, and God forbid, if you have family around there, you're really going to take all this magical fucking time? No, you're probably going to take the target out any means necessary. You're going to go for the main motherfucking torso. You're not going to be making like an eyeball shot, you know, aim small, miss small bullshit. That is fucking bullshit. So I think it is a bit of a scam. I think a lot of guys buy into that stupid hype. They overpay for night sights, and I think it's retarded. That is my personal opinion. You may differ, but circling back to the 1911, the GI model does not have those adjustable sights. There are others that do, if you do want larger sights, especially if you shoot this at the range. Now, with that whole fucking rant done, what I am getting at is that I do not think, even if you are a medium to advanced shooter, I don't know if in this current market with the modern offerings, if a 1911 officer's model is right for concealed carry. I do carry it. It is an illogical carry choice. However, I am accurate with it. And one of Clint Smith's suggestions was, you know, carry what you can shoot fucking the flies off of a wing, you know, or the wings off of a fly, rather, other way around. You know, carry something like that because you need to be lethal. You need to be accurate. You need to be very competent with your weapon. So I do rotate this into my carry. One, for the band reasons with capacity. Two, I happen to enjoy 1911, so that falls in with familiarity and nostalgia. It is something that I shoot well. Now, obviously, if I was given this and I could one gun to rule them all, no, I am not going to have this at all. And that's why I'm trying to suggest that maybe you do not entertain buying one of these. It is heavy. It has limited capacity. You can't really see a whole lot of officers' magazines at modern sporting goods stores. You will typically see the standard capacity, you know, full-size 1911 magazines. So that's something to consider. Same would go for the holsters. Typically, you're going to find mostly the full-size holsters and not the officer's model of holsters. So this means you're probably going to be buying online quite a bit more and paying that shipping cost, yada, yada, yada. So that would be something else to consider. I don't think I would entertain it. If I was to carry a 1911, you know what I would suggest carrying? Carrying a full-size 1911. I honestly think that because the spring tension is perfectly tuned, because you get a little bit more oomph with that slight increase in barrel length, because you get slightly more capacity, in my opinion, I do think that a full-size 1911 would probably be the route I would take over the officer's model. This is an antiquated design. This is something that would have came out before the modern offerings of the polymer framed firearms. Other than that, I know I'm sick, and I know that I went on a little tangent there. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, go ahead and leave them below. I do not check my channel frequently. However, I do my best to answer every single person when I do upload and check the channel. I want to thank you guys. If you guys have a concealed carry that's a little wacky, by all means, let me know. I mean, in my opinion, this is better than motherfucking nothing. I would carry this before I would carry nothing at all. So I don't hate on it. I am saying, though, from a fiscal and new shooter perspective, if you were to be eyeballing this, I think you can do better. However, if you are in a banned state and this is one of the ones that's easier to get, or if you come across this and it is a slamming deal, fucking go for it. I don't think that you're going to be disappointed. There are some things to keep in mind about it. However, when compared to those modern offerings, there are better choices out there. But I would maybe opt for a full-size 1911 over an officer's 1911. And I would certainly go with a 45 ACP over a 9mm, just because the weight just doesn't make any sense for a 9mm officer's 1911 at all. Even the full-size doesn't make any sense. You can carry something much more effective, much lighter, probably higher capacity anyway. So thank you guys for watching. I'll talk to you next time.